Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to use Smind Style properly. This is the secret to customizing your content, images, and buttons quickly and keeping them consistent across your page. So what exactly is Smind Style? Think of it as a master control section. It lets you manage every element of your store from one single place instead of having to edit every section one by one. Inside this block, you have total control. You can customize the color, typography, layout, button, variants products, input, icons, product cards, product badge, blog cards, content container, media, and drop-down pop-up, basically everything. For this example, we're going to use Smind Style to customize just the home page. Because of that, you'll see the block is placed under the Template Group tab. This setup is perfect when you want to create a unique design just for a specific landing page or an A/B test. However, if you want these styles to apply to your entire store, you need to do two things. First, add this block to the Global Group tab and make sure you remove it from the template group so they don't conflict. The most important thing to remember here is Smind Style only works with Smind sections. If you try to use sections from a different theme, these settings won't apply. So for this video, everything you see here from the header down to the footer is built using the Smind section app. Now let's jump into the color block. You'll see we have 10 different color schemes available, but for this example, I'm just going to use Scheme 1 to style the entire homepage. To make sure your color changes actually show up, you need to check two things. First, make sure your sections are actually set to use Color Scheme 1. You can check this by clicking on a section and scrolling down to the Color tab. As you can see here, both the section and the content are set to Scheme 1. Second, and this is really important, you need to make sure you haven't added a specific color block inside that individual section. If a section has its own color block, it overrides the global style. So remove that block if you want the global style to work. You should only use a color block if you want that specific section to look totally different from the rest of the page. Okay, now that we've selected Scheme 1 and we need to customize the color, first up, we have a background control. This is your base layer. Simply click the color swatch to open the picker and choose a solid color right here. In our example, we're using a dark gray color. Right below that, you have the gradient options. If you set a gradient, it will replace your solid background color wherever possible. So use this if you want that modern, fading color effect. Now for the text. To ensure readability, we have 3 typography settings. First is heading color. This affects all your major titles, H1 through H6. Let's pick a new color here that contrasts well with the dark gray background. Next is text color. This controls your standard body paragraph and descriptions. Last is subtext color. This takes care of the smaller details like captions or secondary info. Next up, let's look at shadows. This setting controls the drop shadow color behind elements with depth, like buttons or product cards. For this video, I'm going to set the shadow to white to create a strong contrast. Now, you might notice that nothing actually changed on the screen. That is simply because none of our current sections have shadows enabled yet. So since we can't see the result right now, we'll just set the color and come back to check this effect later. Links. This determines the color of any clickable text in your paragraphs. And for the hover links, this sets the color that the link changes to when a customer hovers their mouse over it. Now let's move down to the interactive parts of your site, the buttons and inputs. First, we have the button settings. In Smind Style, we split these into 2 types, solid and outline. Solid buttons. These are your primary call to action buttons, and this is your solid button style. For the solid button background, this will set the main fill color. As you can see, we have ours set to black to make it stand out. For the solid button label, this controls the text color inside that button, which we've set to white for readability. You can also customize the hover background and hover label to create a visual effect when a customer moves their mouse over the button. Next is outline button style. These are your secondary buttons. As you can see, this is your outline button style. For the outline button, this single setting controls both the border and the text color for these buttons, which we've set to white for readability. For the hover outline button, defines the background color that appears when someone hovers over it. Finally, we have the inputs block. This controls any text field where a customer types, like a search bar, newsletter signup, or contact form. You have 4 simple controls here. First is background, which sets the fill color inside the text box. Next is text, which defines the color of the words as they type. Then you have borders, which controls the lines surrounding the box. And lastly, hover borders, which allows you to highlight that outline color when a user actually clicks inside to start typing. Now let's move on to the Customize the Typography blocks. This block controls the fonts and text styles across your sections. First, you have a very important decision to make right at the top. Override fonts of the theme. If you keep this unchecked, like we have here, they will simply inherit the fonts you've already set in your main Shopify theme settings. But if you check this box, you unlock the ability to set specific fonts right here that will replace your theme's defaults for these sections. Let's look at the headings settings. This controls all your big titles, H1 to H6. For the font family, here you can pick the specific font for your titles. In our example, we've chosen Manrope style for a classic look. Below that, you have sliders for font size and line height. We've kept these at 100%, which means they stay true to the default size, but you can slide them up or down to scale all your headings at once. Letter spacing. This controls the air between characters. We've set ours to 0 pixels to give the titles a little room to breathe. Finally, you have text case. This sets ours to original, which means the text shows up exactly as you type it. You could change this to uppercase if you want all your titles to be capitalized automatically. Next is the body text. This covers all your standard paragraphs and descriptions. For the font family, we've paired our heading with Roboto style here for easy reading. Just like with headings, you can tweak the size and line height. We also set the letter spacing to 0.6 pixels, just slightly tighter than the headings. And lastly, we have accent or highlight font. You can pick the font for special details like prices, badges, or subtitles. And we're using Anto style here. This is great for making those small, important details like your promotional message that stand out from the rest of the text. Next, we need to scroll down and find the button and extras. First up is the button settings. Here, you select which font family your buttons will use, so you can choose any type of font family. We've set this to accent. This means all buttons will automatically use that Anto font we just picked in the previous step. We've also set the text case to uppercase or capitalized style if you want. Finally, let's look at the extras. This allows you to fine-tune the typography for 3 very specific elements: prices, menus, and subheadings. As you can see, we currently have the price font, menu font, and subheading font, so you can choose each font style for each one. Want total control over your design? You're going to love the Typography Advanced block. While the previous section let you scale everything at once, this block lets you define the exact pixel size for every single heading level. First, let's look at desktop headings. This sets the size of your text on computer screens. Take this image with text section. This title is our H1, so we've set it to 44 pixels. Down here in the featured collection, this heading is an H2, which we set to 34 pixels. Moving to the collection list, the main heading here is our H3 at 26 pixels. And for this smaller text right here serves as our H4 at 20 pixels. And finally, for the product titles over here, we are using H5 set to 16 pixels. Now, let's switch gears to mobile headings. This area lets you adjust all those sizes specifically for mobile views, ensuring your store looks professional and readable no matter what device your customer is using. Now, under Content/Description, you'll see something really cool. Instead of just one body font size, they give you 4 standard variables: extra small, XS, small, S, medium, M, and large, L. Scrolling down to the section, for example, we use the description for the medium size, so we can set it to 16 pixels. This is your standard paragraph size, easy to read for most people. Next is the description text for the large size, so we set it to 18 pixels. This works well for intro paragraphs or emphasized text. Just like with headings, we can adjust these specifically for mobile views. Alright, let's customize those buttons. For the font size of button, we've set the text inside the button to 14 pixels. To make the button text clearer, we bumped the spacing up to 0.6 pixels. And right now, we have the weight set to regular. If you want your buttons to feel punchier, you could switch this to bold or black right here. Next, we need to style the specific functional text, your subheadings, badges, and menus. First, let's look at subheadings. These are the small titles that usually sit above or below your main headers. We have 2 size options here. For example, we will set the extra small size for that subheading to 14 pixels. Then we also set the small size for that subheading to 16 pixels. Now for the mobile views, we kept the sizes exactly the same. Since 14 and 16 pixels are already quite small, we don't need to shrink them down any further for phones. Next, we set the weight to regular for subheadings so they don't fight for attention with your main bold headings. Next up is the badge settings. This controls those little sale or sold out stickers on your product cards. And we set this to 14 pixels for the font size. After that, we added a tiny bit of spacing, 0.2 pixels, to make sure the text is crisp. Most importantly, we set the weight to bold. You want these badges to pop out so customers instantly see what is on sale. Finally, we have the menu typography. This controls your navigation bar. We're sticking with 14 pixels for the menu size, which is a standard readable size for navigation. Then we set the spacing to 0.3 pixels for a little extra breathability. And here is a pro tip. We set the weight to semi-bold. This makes your menu links stand out just enough from the body text, helping users navigate your site without it looking too heavy. Last but not least, let's look at 2 critical areas: your inputs, where customers type, and your prices, what they pay. These small tweaks can have a huge impact on user experience. First, the input settings. These control the text inside search bars and email forms. And we'll set this to 14 pixels to keep it standard and readable. Next, we can set the letter spacing to -0.5 pixels. A slightly negative spacing here can make the text feel more compact and modern. For the font weight, we chose Light Style. This is a nice touch because it differentiates the text the user types from the bolder text on the rest of the page. And finally, the most important number on the page, your prices. The settings give you 3 different sizes to control exactly how prices appear in different spots. For the XL font size, this is used for the main price on the product detail page. You want this to be big and clear. For the LG font size, this is typically used for the compare at price or special highlight prices. For the MD font size, this controls the price size on product cards in your collection grids. It needs to be smaller to fit nicely in the grid. For all prices, we set the letter spacing and the weight to regular to keep them clean and easy to scan. Now that our colors and fonts are perfect, let's talk about structure. The layout block controls exactly how your content sits on the page. First up, we have page width. This sets the standard container size for your site, ensuring your content stays centered and easy to read. To show you how this works, this specific section here uses a boxed layout. This means it follows this rule directly. If you change the page width slider right here, you will see the width of this section change right along with it. Next is full width padding. Even when you use a full width section like this featured collection, this setting adds a safety zone. It ensures your text and buttons never hug the very edge of the screen, giving your design a little breathing room. Now, let's look at the space between sections. If you want more white space between distinct parts of your page, you can bump this number up. But for our design, we are going to set it to 0 pixels. This makes our sections stack perfectly on top of each other for a seamless, modern look. Moving on to space between elements. This controls the gaps inside a section. For example, look at the distance between the title and the paragraph in this product detail section. For desktop, we'll keep this at 100%. But for mobile, we need to be efficient. We are going to tighten this to 80% to keep the page length manageable for phone users. Finally, let's configure the grid settings. This affects any section with rows and columns, like this gallery section. For desktop, we've set both the horizontal and vertical space to 10 pixels. This creates a clean, consistent gutter between your cards. For mobile, we reduced this to 6 pixels. On a small phone screen, every pixel counts, so shrinking these gaps helps your images look bigger and better. Now, let's give your buttons some personality. The buttons block controls the shape and depth of every call to action on your site. First, we have the size controls. If you want chunkier, bigger buttons without changing the font size, you can crank this up. Next up is the custom size. This is options to set fixed widths or heights for your buttons in the desktop and mobile views. If you want to change the size of the text inside the button, you must go back to the advanced typography settings. Next, let's define the shape with the border settings. So we've gone bold here with a 5 pixels border. This gives the button a really strong outlined look. Next, we need to set the opacity to 75%. This will add a nice touch of transparency. Then, we set the corner radius to 0 pixel. This means our buttons have sharp 90-degree corners for a modern, edgy look. Finally, let's make them pop off the page with shadows. For the shadow preset, we selected L Blur, or Large Blur. This gives a nice, soft, diffuse glow behind the button. And we can increase the intensity up to 80%. This creates a high contrast shadow that really lifts the button off the background. For the custom shadow, you can design your own shadow effect rather than relying on the pre-made presets. If you want to change the shadow color for all sections, you have to go back to the color blocks and find a shadow color to change it. Now, let's talk about the most interactive part of your product page, the variants. These are the buttons your customers click to pick their size or color. First, let's style the outline. For the thickness, we set this to 3 pixels. This gives each option a solid, visible border so customers know exactly where to click. Move on to the corner radius options. We cranked this up to 20 pixels for both desktop and mobile. Next, let's add some depth with shadows. We'll set our favorite L blur for a soft, modern look, and we set the opacity down to 55%. Then you can enable the custom shadow to create your own shadow effect. Now, let's focus on the inputs. These are the fields where your customers interact with you, whether it's searching for a product or signing up for your newsletter. We want these to feel friendly and easy to use. First, let's look at the padding for the newsletter signup. This controls the space inside the box. We've set the horizontal spacing to 8 pixels. This gives the text a little buffer from the edge. Then you can set the vertical spacing to 16 pixels. It feels more comfortable and clickable than a skinny text box. And we'll set the same spacing for the mobile view. Next is the border. We went with 3 pixels outline. It's solid enough to be seen clearly. Next, we can decrease the opacity to 45%. This softens the look so the lines don't feel too harsh or aggressive. Then we matched our other buttons with a 20 pixels radius. This gives us those nice rounded edges that look great on mobile and desktop view. Finally, the shadow. We'll use the L blur again for consistency. Next, we'll set this to 65%, making it look like it's sitting on top of the page ready to be used. Then you can enable the custom shadow to create your own shadow effect. All right, let's look at the icons. These are the little arrows, carts, and search symbols scattered across your site. First, we have icon thickness, where you can control the line weight of the icon strokes. Next, we have the size controls for the desktop and mobile. We've kept this at 100%. This is the standard size designed to fit perfectly with the text. Now, let's style your product cards. These are the boxes that hold your products in the collection grid, so we want them to look perfect. First, we need to change the product with the border settings, and we're going to set very bold here with 6 pixels. Then check out image padding. The product images stretch all the way to the edge of the card when we change the settings, so we set this to 0 pixels to maximizes the size of your product photography. Move on to the opacity option. We set it to 100%. This creates a solid, heavy frame around each item. To keep things consistent with our buttons and inputs, we set the radius to 20 pixels for both desktop and mobile. To give the card some lift, we have the shadow, and we'll use the preset shadow, which is L blur. Next, we'll set the opacity to 50%. It's subtle enough not to distract from the product. And you can adjust your own shadow if you want by enabling the custom shadow option. Alright, let's look at the color swatch settings. These are the little bubbles that show available colors. We'll set this to portrait, landscape, or square style for the color swatch. This is great if your swatches are actually mini photos of the product rather than just flat colors. Next, you can change the width of color swatch in the mobile and desktop if you want. Now let's zoom in on the details for the swatch style. We'll set the outline to 3 pixels so it's clearly visible against the dark gray background. Next, we set the corner radius to 20 pixels for both desktop and mobile. Just like our other buttons, this turns the swatches into perfect, friendly circles. Next, we have the inner padding. It adds a small white gap between the color dot and the outer ring. Finally, check the swatch item gap. This means our color bubbles sit right next to each other, creating a compact, seamless row of options. If you want them spread out, you would increase this number. Now let's look at product badges. These are those little sale or sold out stickers that sit on top of your product images. First, we have the layout direction. This means if a product has multiple, they will line up side by side. If you switch this to vertical, they would stack on top of each other. Next is the size and spacing. We left the padding scale at 100%. This keeps the badge size standard. If you want to customize your own product badge, you can enable the custom size option to adjust the width and height for the product badge. Then we can adjust the margins. This pushes the badge slightly away from the very edge of the image, giving it a nice premium placement. Finally, let's style the border. We can set a 2 pixels border to give it a crisp definition. Then we need to keep the opacity to 100% so the outline is solid and clear. For the corner radius option, we want to change the new style. Unlike our buttons, which were round, we made these sharp and square. This contrast helps distinguish them as informational tags rather than clickable buttons. Standard colors are fine, but if you really want to grab attention, you need to customize your badges. First up, the sale badge. We want this to be exciting. We set this to white so it stands out clearly against the color. Next, we chose a bright electric blue color for the border. This gives it a sharp, high-energy outline. Now, pay attention here. We set a solid pale indigo color for the background, but we can also change to the linear gradient to make it stand out. So the gradient replaces the solid background wherever possible. Next, the sold out badge. We want this to look different so customers don't get confused. We kept the text to white for consistency, and we used the neon green for the border to be high visibility. For the background, we can select the same color of the border, and we chose a pink to orange gradient. By using a completely different color palette than the sale badge, customers instantly know it. Finally, let's style your blog cards. We think that your blog posts should look like they belong to the same family as your products, so we are going to mirror the settings we just used. First, we need to customize the border, and we're going to keep that bold to 6 pixels line with the full opacity to 100%. Just like with our products, we want the featured image to fill the entire top of the card, edge to edge. We'll set the image padding to 0 pixels. Next, we will set the corner radius to 20 pixels for both desktop and mobile. And lastly, at the shadow. We'll select the preset shadow to L blur. Next, adjust the opacity to 50%. This gives the blog post just enough depth to pop off the background without looking heavy. If you want to adjust your own shadow, let's customize it by enabling the custom shadow options. Now let's focus on the content containers block. These are the wrapper boxes for things like your rich text or image with text areas, and we want them to feel just as premium as your products. Let's start with the border. For the desktop thickness, we set this to 6 pixels. This gives us that bold, confident frame we love on big screens. But for the mobile thickness, we decrease this to 3 pixels. Why? Because a 6-pixel border can look too clunky on a small phone screen. By shrinking it to 3 pixels, we keep the design looking elegant and responsive. Next, the corner radius. We set both desktop and mobile to 20 pixels. This maintains that consistent, friendly vibe we've built across the entire store, from buttons to product cards. And to finish it off, the shadow. We're going to select the preset shadow L blur and set the opacity to 50%. This ensures that your text sections have the exact same depth and feel as your product grids. If you want to adjust your own shadow, let's customize it by enabling the custom shadow options. Now let's focus on the media block. This controls the framing for your images and videos which appear on the page. Look at the border settings first. We set the thickness to 6 pixels for the desktop views. This gives our content containers a solid, bold presence on large screens. Once again, we used the responsive control to decrease this down to 3 pixels for mobile views. Next, we'll set the corner radius to 20 pixels for both desktop and mobile. Now for the shadow. We switched this one to M blur. Why medium instead of large? Sometimes for photos, you want a slightly tighter shadow to keep the image looking crisp. For the opacity, we kept this at 50%. It provides just enough lift to make the image float above the background. Last but not least, let's look at the Dropdown and Popup settings, which controls newsletter pop-ups on your store, and we want them to demand attention. First, the border. We'll set both desktop and mobile to 6 pixels for the outline of Popup. And for the opacity, we kept it solid at 100%. Next is the corner radius. We used 20 pixels to match the friendly, rounded look of the rest of your store. And finally, the shadow. We will use the same preset shadow, the L blur, and set the opacity to 50%. And now we are done. We have just walked through every single design block in the Smind style, and take a second to look at what we've built. Thanks for watching.